So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. It does mean, however, that you've missed episode 1. It's not a major thing. Stay with us at the moment, but I would highly recommend you go back and have a listen to the first episode because it was compelling listening. We had a magnificent panel led by Indigenous health expert in Dr. Janine Mohammed, lawyer and advocate Nigel Nguyen, and Australian cricketers Rachel Haynes and Dan Christian. Now, since episode 1 and leading up to today, a fair bit has happened in the cricketing world. Sadly, post our first episode, Dan Christian was trolled on social media for speaking out about his Aboriginal identity. He then, however, went on to become one of the most successful T20 cricketers in the world, taking out his 8th domestic T20 title as he captained Notts to yet another title as well. The Australian men's cricket team travelled over to the UK and received, mixed reports on their decision not to take a knee at the start of the series against England as an acknowledgement of the fight against global racism. The responses to this were mixed and probably at both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. From certain groups who were giving full support of their decision to groups who were indifferent to groups who were disappointed and then to outright condemnation, all of which further highlight why programs like this are wanting to give voice to those who it affects the most. And the Australian women's cricket team, they just keep on their winning ways. And they used their first home game of the summer against New Zealand to unveil the magnificent walkabout wicket silk once again. And an invitation was passed on to the White Ferns to join them in a barefoot circle in acknowledgement of land and Indigenous culture. Rachel Haynes spoke beautifully in episode 1 about this journey of understanding and approach to recognition.
Yeah, well, I think the great thing about being involved with it was that it wasn't a superficial event. So quite often when we do things on the field, you walk out as a player and you're just part of that one moment and then you move on and you play the game.
I think it's becoming more and more understood that individual racism isn't created in a vacuum. It emerges and flourishes in societies and communities and groups' foundational beliefs and ways of seeing and doing things, which is then manifested in organisations and institutions and systems around us. Today, our 4 guests will be talking more about the topic of systemic or institutionalised racism. Before we begin though, our acknowledgement to country.
Hi guys, my name is Joshua Layla. I'm a player in our national men's Indigenous cricket team and a player in the Big Bash League. I'm a Kamilaroi man standing on Darug country. I welcome you today from my home in Western Sydney. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Darug land and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. The Mulgaway people have lived down the road from here on the Nepean River for over 30,000 years. Although speaking the same language, the tribes on Darug land were very different in their mythologies, tools and food gathering practices. In fact, they only came together for special ceremonies. We too are here today for our own special ceremony. And much like the Nepean River down the road that connects people and places, we hope this series connects and educates people from all across Australia. Thank you.
I too would like to acknowledge the land in which I'm hosting from today as well. Usually I'm in Melbourne, so I would be on Wurundjeri land. However, today I'm up in Sydney, so would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. However, one more acknowledgement, maybe from you. If you would like to acknowledge the land in which you're watching from, we'd love to see you pop it in the chat function that you've got there. It'd be great to see where people are coming from right across Australia. Now, if you don't know what land you're on, that is quite a-okay. This could be your second ally moment of the day, and you can click on the link provided and you can go on a little journey of discovery. Well, cricket is littered with fantastic partnerships, and we've got a new one to cricket today because I'm going to introduce Ben and Tamika to you all. Ben is a proud Wurundjeri and Rutaman man born and raised in Western Sydney. Through university, Ben had a positive vision to bring all cultures together to celebrate the oldest surviving culture on the planet, which, as we all know, is over 60,000 years of traditions. And we've got a third family member coming along in the background as well. We'll get to the introductions there in a second. Ben is also a senior youth worker and mentor to students in the community, as well as finishing up his Bachelor of Primary Education. Sitting next to him is Tamika, who is a proud Aboriginal and Torres Strait and South Sea Islander woman, and is working as a community organiser and campaigner at SEED, which is an Indigenous youth climate network tackling environmental justice and climate change. Tamika is currently studying 2 degrees, not just 1, 2, environmental and marine science as well. And guys, I'm going to pass it over to you for the third introduction, seeing I've struggled through the first one.
Awesome. Thank you for having us. And this is our little assistant in the background, Luca. Say hi. Hi.
Hey, welcome to the world.
Thank you for having us. So we're based up here on Cubby Cubby and Gubby Gubby country here in southeast Queensland on the Sunshine Coast.
Wonderful
introduction. As mentioned, I was born and raised in Western Sydney, Mount Druitt. My family comes from the far west New South Wales plains in Wiradjuri country. Mum was raised on the Wiradjuri mission there in Cowra, around 32 acres. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to make my way up these ways and reside here on the Sunshine Coast, as Tamika said, on Cubby Cubby country.
Fantastic, guys. We're thoroughly looking forward to getting your insights this evening. Our fourth guest, let's count them now, they're rising as the session goes on, is Azeem Rafiq. Now, the name might not sort of spring to mind straight away, but these names probably will. Joe Root, Ben Stokes, Joss Butler, James Vince, all played underneath the captaincy of Azeem as the captain of the England under-19 team in 2010. Born in Pakistan, Azeem came to England when he was at the age of 10, captained the England under-15s, and also became the first Yorkshire cricket player of an Asian background to captain an England side at any level. This year, Azeem went public with his account of racism experienced at Yorkshire Cricket Club. Azeem, it's been I want to say like a roller coaster ride for you within cricket. The investigation is still going on at the moment with Yorkshire Cricket Club. I think the most importantly, everyone would love to know is, how are you? You going okay?
First of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, look, it's been a bumpy ride throughout, really. Some very highs, some pretty low times as well. Yeah, the last sort of couple of months have not been the easiest. It's been difficult, quite draining at times. But look, I think the bigger cause, and once I had sort of come out, and I mean, it was quite an emotional interview, and it wasn't actually sort of around this. It was meant to be around my new business, and I got asked a question, and I think I got a little bit emotional and said quite a lot that was inside me for a very long time. Look, it's not been easy, but the most important thing is at some point, I think, in the future, hopefully you can look back and say, look, it brought a little bit of a change, if not the big change that we all desire for, really. So I think for the cause and for the future generations, I think it's going to be worth it.
Azeem, you said it's been draining. I'm tipping it's probably because of 2 major factors. One, for the fact that you've had to go through this whole process and deal with it for so long. And then once you finally do come out, you then become almost the voice of racism in England and cricket, along with the likes of Ebony Rainford Brent and Michael Holding. How do you deal with that kind of emotion and keeping your energy levels up?
Yeah, look, I mean, first and foremost, the whole experience, and then even going through it's been more or less reliving the experience, because with investigation and everything, I've had to be sat in rooms for a good 10 hours a day, going through a lot of things, and that's just brought it all back, which has been difficult. And then I think the toughest part has been trying to balance it with a young family, a new business, and then, I mean, whenever you sort of, I guess that's why it's took me so long, or I'm surprised I even done it when I have, is because when you do come out with anything like this, you're targeted. You're had to deal with a lot of social media stuff. There's a hell of a lot of stuff being sort of fed about me, which is not nice. But look, at the end of the day, I've sort of opened up pretty honestly, really, and I intend to keep doing that going forward. I'm not really fearful of anyone or anything in that matter. I think I've got full faith in my religion now, and the fact is, these are the facts. And look, doesn't really bother me what anyone thinks about me as a person, or what my feelings might have been in the past. I think the thing moving forward is really the bigger cause, and to really make cricket a game where it is a game for everyone and there is equal opportunity, because it should have been the best time of my life, and it, apart from a few moments, it really wasn't. And that's not something anyone else should have to go through. Now we're in 2020, so it needs to stop, really.
Yeah, well, we certainly commend your bravery, and we sort of reinforce too that you're in a very safe space on this panel as well. So thank you so much for your time. Our final guest, well, he's known to most Australians, was part of one of the most successful eras of Australians men's cricket, both in tests and one-day internationals. Best test figures of 7 for 37, highest score of 201. Jason Gillespie was one of the most feared fast bowlers in Australian cricket. Since retiring, he's gone on to coach and has been a successful coach with Sussex and with Yorkshire, and is now with South Australia and the Adelaide Strikers. That's sort of the usual introduction. I was going to go with, he was ahead of his time in the fashion stakes because the mullet is back. He's a vegan. And he also has one of the most unique celebrations in cricket as well. Let's remember Dizzy's first stint in the Test arena.
Well, that's bowling didn't make any difference. That's his first Test wicket as well. He's knocked the stumps all over the place. He nearly got him caught, and now he's comprehensively bowled him out.
Well, there may be a shortage of runs today, but there's no shortage of incident. It's been fascinating all day long. And now Gillespie has made one mark on the game.
Dizzy, I picked that clip because we didn't have time to show you highlights of your double century. But there was the comment in there that one mark on the game. That was after you got your first wicket. You've made multiple thousands of marks ever since, as a player, as a coach, as a mentor. Is there a couple that you can pick out that you're exceptionally proud of?
Well, thanks for the intro, Mel. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I can't think of anything offhand, to be honest. I was just so proud to play, and just every moment I just cherished. So it's hard to pick one that just absolutely sticks out.
Just too many. Gee, that's a
I don't know
career,
about that. I wasn't trying to put it that way, but no, certainly just.
The list is that long.
You're just in the moment, aren't you? And you just, I always tried to play the game in the moment as much as I could, and not worry about what happened in the past, and not think too much what could happen in the future, and just really embrace, being out there, and, kind of take that into my coaching a little bit, I suppose. I want players to really just enjoy that, and enjoy that absolute moment, because you can't control what happens in the past. You can't control what could happen in the future, but you can have a bit of a say what's happening right here and now. You can control your attitude, your efforts. So really try and make that a bit of a focus, I suppose.
We certainly can't control what's happened in the past, but I think we certainly do need to recognise it. Ben and Tamika, I'll come to you on this one to start things. We know that since European arrival, there's been an incomprehensible suffering for Indigenous people within Australia, a combination of genocide, the introduction of diseases, subjugation, segregation, cultural assimilation, a wide variety of things. There are some people that would say that that's in the past, and the laws and the policies have institutionalised racism anymore. What would be your reply to those people who still struggle with that phrase?
That's still a phrase that even in this day and age, 2020, we think that racism has come to a stop, but in all honesty, I do think it still is getting worse, and with the power of social media and technology as well, that only contributes to these stereotypes that are inflicted on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It's so disheartening to hear Australians say that about their First Nations people here on this continent. And, at the end of the day, we come from the oldest surviving culture, and that's something that I pride myself in. Our family prides ourselves in as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing here as well is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people haven't had the proper chance to heal. The evidence of institutionalised racism and the proper history of this country hasn't yet been told properly in schools for people to really understand. So people are really miseducated, and they miscommunicate that across as racism, and racism can really be misunderstood as people just not knowing. And I think Jason touched on it there, where he said we really can't control what happened in the past, but we can influence the future. In regards to that question, it's still very apparent. Like our kids are still being taken away at like 10 times more the rapid rate than they were during the stolen generation since the apology from Kevin Rudd. It's the statistics are we're still dying at really high rates during the poor health in the judicial system. We're getting lost in these cycles that we never had 250 years ago. I know it sounds like a very long time, but you think about that generationally, that's at least every family member lives for 50 years. That's five different family generations. Really, it's not really that long if you really look at how long we've been here for, and the period of time that we've looked after ourselves and this country. So the impacts of colonization are still very apparent. They're still very apparent with non-Indigenous people in the way they express themselves about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They don't understand like I said, it's about communication. They don't have the education on us. And the crazy thing is we go to school and we're not educated enough on ourselves. We have to relearn that stuff when we leave school, or outside of school, we get different education. So we're walking in two different worlds, and having to walk in two different worlds, you have to create a personality that fits in for you to be able to succeed somewhere. So you have to, we still have to work 10 times harder to get to the positions that we're in.
I'd like to show you the interview that Azeem alluded to before, speaking about his time at Yorkshire Cricket Club.
Walking onto the field at Trent Bridge, and there was me, Adil Rashid, Ajmal Shahzad and Rana, and a senior player went, there's too many of you lot, we need to have a word about it. And no doubt it was disguised as banter. It wasn't done in a malicious way, but it was disguised as banter. But it's racist. It's not acceptable. And I didn't find it funny. Even then, even when at that point, and very high profile, I didn't find it funny at all. You try and in yourself get stronger. You try and, right, no, it doesn't affect me. But slowly, it does. There was few people that were openly, few that tagged along, and a lot of people that let it happen, and that's just how, and it just built up, and it took its toll on me massively. I regularly went to training, came back home and cried for the rest of the day. I'd reported it to the channels that we get told to report to, but nothing was done. So my faith and trust in anything being done above and beyond that wasn't that high. We'd go on socialising nights out. I'd be talking to people and this one guy would come over without a miss every time. Don't speak to him, he's a P word. Or don't speak to him, stereotypically he stinks. I'll be first to put my hand up and say I made mistakes. I regret things that I did to try and fit in. The minute I stopped doing the things that I did to fit in, I felt incredibly isolated. The thing that hurts me more than anything else is people saw it happen. Privately, a lot of people said it's wrong, but when it came to it, no one, not one person, actually stood up against these powerful people and said what you're doing is wrong. I was on the balcony a couple of times, I was nearly gone, and it hurts me to say that now I was gone.
Azeem, I think the first thing I'd like to know is, do you need to know why it all happened, or are you just wanting to make sure that you can move forward as quickly as possible?
I think it's a combination of things. I think sort of why it was allowed to happen is something I think will help me heal. But I think more importantly, it is for me about how we can stop it happening moving forward. Really, I think it's just touching on what Tamika and Ben was saying as well. I think it is, in my opinion as well, here from my experience, it's worse now because it's done in such a way that it's really difficult to really open up and speak about it. So yeah, look, what's happened, it will help to get a few answers on that for my healing, but I'm not so much really bothered about myself anymore because I think my time's gone. Especially since I've come out, I think it's going to be really difficult for me to play any part within the game. But I think moving forward, if I can help any, and I think that's been the sad thing, I've had a lot of messages reaching out from kids as young as 14, 15, and that worries me because right till the and I didn't want to believe it was racism. I didn't want to think it was that. I wanted to try and, as we've been brought up, try and sort of fight for everything and sort of let it go. But I think there comes a point when you hit breaking point, and them last 2 years were a breaking point for me. And like I said, I think it's more how we can stop it happening moving forward.
Did you think it wasn't racism because people told you it wasn't racism?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you even pulled anyone up on it, it was like, well, can you not take a joke? And a lot of times it was disguised as banter, but there was a lot of feeling in the banter. And I mean, I don't know coincidentally or not, but there's a couple of comments that did happen following on from that. They were sort of acted on. So the comment about there's too many of you lot, I mean, I don't think we played a game. The four of us played a game again together. So whether that was just banter or not is questionable, really. And a lot of times it is disguised as banter, but it's just quite simply not funny. Everyone has different sort of banter levels as well, I guess. But it's just not funny at all.
Yeah. Ben and Tamika, you're not cricket people at all. So when you watch something like this, what's your initial reaction?
Well, the same thing happens over here in Australia. They even in the media, they call it casual racism. But ask anyone that's copying it, especially from mob First Nations people, it's not a casual thing for us. It doesn't feel nice to be boxed in by your words, for us to have to feel like we have to carry that, either have to say something to you or walk away upset at ourselves that we didn't say anything, that we weren't able to say anything. It sort of puts us in a position of powerless. You're powerless, tries to strip you of your power and put you in a box. But we might have something different.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, I'm so sorry, brother, that you had to experience that. And, it's just heartbreaking to hear stories like that. And although, I haven't been involved in the cricket industry before, just hearing the racism that happens throughout sporting moments is so disheartening, because especially for our mob as well, sport is such a massive thing in our communities, and this segregation and I guess the attacks of racism that is still happening can really ultimately affect our mental health and well-being. But then at the same time, if you are an elite athlete, how are you supposed to respond to that in a way that is educating people, but also standing up for yourself and for the next generation of people of colour as well, and making sure that they feel like they're comfortable to excel in whatever they want to as well.
And the same thing with you again, Azeem, is like when Mel, you asked him the question, it is normally, and it goes back to the last question, it is normally, when people say racism doesn't exist, or it's not racism, you should just take a joke, it's not normally a person of colour or someone that's coming from your background that's saying that's predominantly someone from the wider community telling you what the way you should feel about yourself. And that in its right isn't just, because you can't control how you feel, neither can anybody else, and they shouldn't be telling you you should feel subjective or not subjective to what you've just heard.
Dizzy, in your time in cricket, coming through as a player and now coach, do you feel as if this space is changing in a good way, or are we dealing with the same situation over and over again?
Well, I mean, it's just listening to certainly Azeem's experience, and look, I was coach at Yorkshire for a few years when Azeem was there, and and when I saw, I left Yorkshire at the end of 2016, and then obviously a few years later I see this interview that Azeem gives, and that was quite confronting, quite heartbreaking for me as a coach, because some of those experiences he was saying happened when I was at the club. A lot of those experiences happened when I wasn't around, but still quite heartbreaking to listen to that. And I remember there were a couple of times when I saw Azeem struggling, and I didn't know it was these undertones. There were things going on regarding racism, because I remember Azeem, there was some issues with his cricket, but listening to that interview on Sky really opened up my eyes that there was a lot more to that period at the club when his game was suffering and he was battling off the field, which in turn there was some battles on the field, but it almost kind of everything just sort of meshed together, if that makes sense. And that's why I sort of just, it was heartbreaking for me. It was quite upsetting for me to watch that. And I was a bit like you, Mel. I watched that interview that Azeem had a number of times. And yeah, it was a hard watch, and it should be a hard watch for people. Because, you know, he spoke from the heart. It was just open and honest. And, you know, and in answer to your question, sorry, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but in answer to your question, look, look, certainly I think, you know, Azeem and Tamika and Ben touched on social media. I think that has given a voice to some people that may not have had one in a negative sense. And no matter, you know, and what we've got to understand, and I'm from a slightly older generation, so, you know, I didn't grow up with social media, whereas a lot of the younger generation are growing up with it. So it's easy for someone like myself to say, oh, just don't look at it. But that's not that simple. If you've grown up with it, you know, that's a challenge within itself. And so, I think, and it comes down to, you know, the guys here chatting, so that education and communication. And for me, that is absolutely vital. If we're going to move forward from all this nonsense, the communication and education and some empathy, I think, you know, has got to be there. It's a simple, for me, it's simple in that regard. I know it's not as simple in you know, in the real world, but yeah.
Azeem, we've mentioned Yorkshire on a couple of occasions here, but they're not on their own here. You've played with a number of players that have played for a variety of different counties, a variety of different countries. We've spoken about issues here in Australia as well. What do you think is this is a tough one, but what do you think is the main reasons why a player doesn't come forward in the first instance?
Yeah, I don't think Yorkshire is the only, like you said, it's a wider problem. I mean, that's one thing that has surprised me when people, we didn't think it would be in cricket, but it's in our society, so why wouldn't it be in cricket? And yeah, I think, look, we've had this issue the last couple of months. We've had a lot of people come forward, a lot of people, but no one's prepared to put their name to their statements through fear of what it might do to themselves within other professions, even their kids within cricket. We had a doctor the other day, and he talked about his experience, and then he wanted to come forward, and then he was like, it's going to affect my profession. So I think that fear of the institution, the fear of that, the history, and I guess what might happen to them.
Yeah.
I guess that is the main reason about why more people are not coming forward. And while you're playing, I think that it's got to be really, I mean, I didn't do it, so it would be wrong of me to ask other people to do it while they're playing. So yeah, I think while they're playing, it's really difficult, and I've had them conversations with a couple of people. But look, one thing I said to a friend of mine was, you were only sort of 10, 20 years down the line, if it happens to your son, you'll feel the pain a lot more than if it happens to yourself. And I guess from my personal experience, it was the loss of my son that sort of gave me the braveness to go, no, actually, enough is enough. Yeah. And it was, I guess, the stuff around that really said to me, right, this can't happen anymore. So I think that's the key to it, really. As I think it is human nature that when it hits closer to home, that's when you realise there's a problem.
When you say it hits closer to home, I think for Australians, it really hit home in 2007-8 when India was touring. There's a test match at the SCG in which Andrew Symonds had an altercation with Harbhajan Singh after it was alleged he was called a monkey on the field. And I mean, we can unpack that in a whole episode in itself because there were so many layers to it. Dizzy, I want to start with you though, because Roy, after that, he was distraught for the fact that he was bringing his teammates down more so than the fact that he had to deal with racism himself. Dizzy, I'd love your thoughts on when we go back to that time. what we can do as a sport to protect players more when something like this happens?
Yeah, I think that's probably gives you an indication of the type of person Andrew Simons is. Really, thinking of himself last, and he's the one that has, has felt the brunt of this racist remark. If you understand the personality, Simo sees things very black and white. This is what was said, and so why isn't anything being done about it? And I don't think he could get his head around that.
Yep.
I think he probably felt a bit let down. I know teammates. I wasn't actually there. It was just a bit past my time in the Aussie side, but I remember speaking to a number of people. They said exactly that. They said Simo just was quite deflated, but he was very conscious of his mates, which is a testament to the character of the guy. He wanted to make sure that everyone was okay and they weren't affected negatively about it. When, with all due respect, he was probably allowed to be thinking that, hang on, this is unacceptable. Something needs to be done, and I think there's got to be lessons taken from that, no doubt. And look, there was a lot of layers to it, as you alluded to, Mel. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and I don't know exactly what was going on, but I mean, the bare facts are, this happened. Simo was probably let down a little bit.
Yeah. Ben and Tamika, when you look at cricket in comparison to all other sports at the moment in Australia, for First Nations people, do you look at it and think it's an inclusive sport?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess, even reflecting on that situation as well and seeing the image of Simo, I was only a young girl, but that was only the person, other than other teams internationally, that was the only person of colour that I would always see that was on an Australian side. And, as a young person growing up as well, Australia, we're supposed to be so multicultural and multifaceted, yet why is there very few people of colour faces that are playing the sport? And, predominantly it is a very white privilege sport as well, and white society sport. And at the end of the day as well, when these situations happen, it can't just be a situation and then nobody is learning from that. We can't just keep having case study after case study. There has to be some action that's taken. And at the end of the day as well, it's up to clubs to take that initiative as well.
Azeem, I'll come to you on this because we look at the England men's one-day international team at the moment and their success last year in the 2019 World Cup. And a lot of the conversation was about the multicultural layers of that team and, cricket breaking through into the Asian community, into the Afro-Caribbean community. Is that reflective, though, of clubland? Because we speak about all these different layers. When you get down to club level, is that being reflected right the way through?
The simple answer is no. Look, the England team, and all due respect to them, knowing quite a few of them quite personally as well, I don't know whether it's happened by plan or by luck, but they don't have this sort of issue in that dressing room. And that's from speaking to a few friends of mine that they've probably, a couple of them say it's the most comfortable they've felt playing cricket. They're allowed to be themselves and they're respected for their cultures. There's no pressures on them to fit in any way, shape or form. That I guess that comes from the leaders a lot. I think Owen Morgan's outstanding. I think Trevor Bayliss, from what I've heard, was really instrumental in that as well. But if you do strip it back, I think that's just a rosy picture at the top currently. That's not to say that England team has not had this problem before and it won't have it in the future, because when you go into the counties, not even club cricket, you've got Birmingham, which is highly populated, and I'm pretty positive that there's not one player on their professional staff. And when you do ask the question, I think you get stuff thrown at you like, yeah, but 50% of our academy is from a South Asian background. You strip it back to Yorkshire, London, Manchester. There was a report recently, and when you go into coaches, and that's where I guess the fitting in part comes in, I think pretty sure there's minimal 3 out of 96 or something. And I think that there's a lot of problems, challenges that you face when you go into that, because I think Ben talked about it right at the start. It's sort of two cultures and you're trying to fit in on both and you end up fitting in nowhere. But you shouldn't have to. And there should be a respect for everyone. Even now, something as simple as I'm not sure all county grounds do halal food. Even right now, it wasn't when there was a few grounds when I was playing in 2018 that still didn't. Strip it back even further. When you play age group cricket coming up, non-existent. So I remember when I was playing age group cricket, I went most of the day without eating. So there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of different challenges. But yeah, I think the thing at the top is quite rosy at the minute. But I think below that's not the same picture.
Yeah, and I remember speaking to Ebony Rainford Brent and hearing her talk about food, and so her mum would pack her lunch or something to eat over the day, a West Indian background, and people would just say, as soon as she opened up, what stinks, or what are you eating that for, that kind of thing. So if the food's there, it's getting questioned. If it's not there, there's another question in itself. Tamika and Ben, I think, well, what's it like to be a young Indigenous person in Australia in 2020?
Being a young Indigenous person in 2020 is hard. There is still so many layers of intergenerational trauma that we ourselves have to go through that own healing and that journey to be able to make sure that the next generation doesn't have to heal and recover from these traumas that have been inflicted from colonization and from systematic racism and institutionalism and that sort of thing as well. And I guess on top of 2020, we've had a global pandemic, and then we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement as well. And with the power of social media, it can be good, but at the same time, I think it can be a very dark side and a very toxic side as well, where people just are performative to go with a trend or a hashtag, whereas they're not taking active action to, be able to change and make the future brighter and more positive and have a better outcome than what we're already living in. And that's something that Ben and I definitely do face. And in this sort of day and age, and with these movements and the global pandemic that's been happening as well, I feel like a lot of people are wanting to change, but they also don't understand the emotional labor that goes behind the scenes of being a First Nations person or a person of colour as well. And they don't understand, how that emotional labour really does take place. And it's really hard for, us to be able to recover and keep being active in our community, persevering to, change the system that we are living in today.
Yeah. That's a big question. Being Blackfellow Australia 2020, me, myself, personally, I'm a very, very proud Wiradjuri man before I'm anything. So growing up in Western New South Wales, I had the opportunity to go to an Aboriginal preschool, grew up in community really strong, but as I've gotten older, and especially now in 2020, being able to go to other communities such as Queensland, and a lot of people don't have that instilled in them because of what's happening within the community. And me and Tamika, we play our part to go out to schools to try and install that type of pride, and they just don't have that connection because there's so much shame with being a black fella within Australia. There's so much shame because you're obligated, being Aboriginal for me, you're obligated to your community, you're obligated to your people to make sure they accomplish where they're meant to be as well. So
yeah,
you're given this responsibility, like with Azeem, he's given this responsibility to be a voice. And even sometimes it's going to get, like you said, it's draining. It gets really, really emotionally. It's a big emotional labor, but you have to keep pushing on for your people to bring this change on, when it shouldn't be us doing the work. Yeah. Because in this country we've already had everything stripped from us, our language, our culture, and even though it's revitalizing, we're still trying to live within all these different worlds, but and be present at the same time. So life itself is a beautiful thing. People are beautiful, black, white, brittle. We're all one people at the end of the day. But having to deal with all this stuff, especially in 2020 when my mum, there's photos of my mum when she was 4 years old at protests in Sydney for the similar things we're fighting for today. It's really, really hard to contemplate, like, why are we still arguing for basic human rights? And like, it sort of makes me really, really emotional. Like, it's my grandmother was denied access to education and many other things, even being allowed to give born in a hospital, give birth to my mum's older sisters, my aunties in hospitals, to the point where they were fighting for basic human rights there. Now, a lot has changed, but we're just screaming out for more. Why can't we have that? Like, it's really confusing for me, and it's scary at the same time, because we talk about our kids. We've got our young one here. What's it going to be like for when he's my age? Is he going to be having to do the same thing? And if not, what can we do to change that? Why isn't anything changing? Everyone's like, oh, you should be doing it for your community. We're out here. We are trying to be a voice. You aren't coming to the table and listening to us. And so it's being blackfellow in 20. Sorry if I use the word blackfellow. That's what we say.
Yeah.
And, it's emotionally, it's really emotionally draining, and it's a lot of emotional labor. And yeah, but I do believe in change. I believe the change is coming. I believe these sort of platforms can see forth change. So yeah.
The thing that keeps coming back to me when you're speaking about this, and it's a point for Azeem as well with his experiences, is that every experience at the moment right across Australia is so different. And so to give a blanket, this is how you help people heal, or this is how you help people identify, is not going to cut the mustard, is it? Because we actually do need to be a lot more specific to people's individual needs. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I had when I did come out, I had a chat with Dizzy about it as well, and something he said to me really struck. I think to get the change, first step, openness and honesty is the first step towards that change. And there's, I mean, we don't even know how many people there is out there suffering. And that's a worry. But look, it's going to be different in different ways. Everyone's going to heal in different ways. But to actually start the healing process, it needs to start now. We can't keep arguing and just trying to show people that there's a problem. That needs to stop. It needs to be about sort of moving forward. How can we stop it happening? Because like Ben said, my worry is what's going to happen to my son. What's going to happen to our kids moving forward? Are they going to be in the same position? The thing that really upsets me is that I love the game of cricket, and I'm not sure I want my son to go anywhere near a cricket ground, and that is really, really upsetting for me. As Dizzy knows, I love the game, but I haven't even got him a bat or a ball yet, and that really, really upsets me. And I think it's time we need to stop talking about and trying to show people there's an issue. It's time to move it forward now and do something about it and get some solutions.
Dizzy, I might come to you on this one. I mean, it's such a difficult topic of conversation because it is personal, and it's close to home, and it's situations that we've all been through, been in, experienced, and it's the sport that we love. And I mentioned that before. How do we love a sport when it doesn't love us back? And so it's a difficult question to ask you here, Dizzy, but how do we speak to someone like Azeem who's not wanting his son to be potentially involved in a sport like this? What's the best way to allow this healing to happen so that we can actually make it a really enjoyable space to just be in?
Well, Mel, it's a good question, and just listening to Ben talk just before, and then just Azeem then, it takes me back to my late father, who he passed away a number of years ago now, but Dad used to work, he was CEO of Aboriginal legal rights in South Australia. And he'd always have a chat, and I'd ask him how work was and things were going on. And he just said, Jace, people don't listen. And that's what Ben was talking about, listening. People aren't listening. And I think that's going to be something that I think has got to happen moving forward. People have got to actually we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in proportion, people need to listen, and listen to Tamika and Ben, listen to Azeem, and try to understand. And I mentioned empathy before. Try and understand. Look at it from look at it through a different set of eyes, and try and understand. And I had an experience. This is a good 11 years ago, I suppose. I was in the UK and I was at a function, and the subject came up that I was the first and currently only Indigenous player that's played Test cricket for Australia, and it just came up in conversation with a group of people, and it was actually quite confronting, and it blew me away because these couple of people actually said to me, "Oh, you're not Aboriginal, are you?" I go, "Yeah, I am," and it was almost as if it was a really bad thing that that I was of Indigenous descent, and they just keep saying, "No, you're not. No, you're not." I go, "Well, yeah, I am." And can I ask you what's wrong with that? And then it's the big backpedal, isn't it? It's a big backpedal. Oh no, and almost as if, I didn't mean offence, but it's just that, and Ben touched on that. In Australia, we call it casual racism. In the UK, it gets hidden and disguised as banter. But it just comes down, and I go back to those words: education, communication. But I think listening, and this is where people got to listen and seek that understanding. Unless that happens, I think, Tamika and Ben's son's going to grow up fighting the same battles. Azeem's son is going to come through, and heartbreaking for him to say to us here in this platform, saying that he doesn't want his son to be involved in a game that he loves. I mean, man, that's heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking, and things have got to change.
Well, things certainly will change with the likes of Ben and Tamika, because earlier on in the year we saw a lot of Black Lives Matter marches right across our capital cities, but we also saw them in smaller regional cities. Ben and Tamika certainly led the charge.
Always was, always will be Aboriginal land, and I'm sick of the treatment that they get, and enough is enough.
Race issues over there in the US, and there's race issues over here in Australia with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander deaths in custody being a very high percent.
I think this, especially on the Sunshine Coast, they've been waiting for something for a very long time, and this is I think it's just the right time.
The event was posted on Facebook, quickly attracting more than 1,000 followers.
Whose lives matter? Whose lives matter? I cannot hear.
Ben and Tamika, when I look at that, I was heartened a lot by the turnout at the marches right across Australia. But I still look at it and I still wonder, with so many people turning up, do they think it was just a moment where they had to rock up and march, or do they understand and realise that by showing up, they're actually part of a movement now, and a movement means action, and that it has to keep going?
Yeah, I actually spoke about this at the march. It was a real trending moment for people online, for your big social media critics, for your celebrities. But at the same time, they turned up. There was people there that had the opportunity to learn. So you can't turn those people away. You can't shame them for being there just for a moment in time, because that could be an opportunity for them to pass on that information. And as Jason, as me, Jason, Tamika, and we were talking about education, that's one part of education. They learned something that day. And what I did touch on as well, the main thing is we need substance. This is just one day. We live this every day. This is 24/7, 365 days a year. We have to walk around in such a white-dominated community or society and feel judged, and then to the point where we are judged, and there are comments made, and there are feelings felt, and there are voices that go unheard. So this is just one day that they've shown up. So we want to see these guys. So we had a conversation. We want to see these guys more. Come to our events. We even gave them the opportunity at the end of the march. Open your arms up. Come give us all a hug. Come feel an Aboriginal person. Come understand who we are, and come have this conversation with us. And we end up getting a whole bunch of people at us on Facebook, and we had to give them the chance to realise that they do need to step back a bit as well after that, because it was really emotional draining for both of us. But yeah, it just, there is definitely needs to be a follow up, not with marches or anything like that. But just come in and listen, have that opportunity to educate yourself. And Jason just touched on it just before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, with the Black Lives Matter marches, we did mention at the march that we did host was that, you know, now that you're here and present in this moment in time, we expect you to be marching with us on January 26th for Invasion Day. Like, you can't celebrate Australia Day and then attend a Black Lives Matter rally. There is a line in between, and you have to choose and really understand and educate, you know, yourselves on these issues that are happening here in Australia since colonisation and the genocide that has happened and continues to happen to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And, you know, I think it was such an important moment, especially here on the Sunshine Coast, being a very white and Western society. And blackfellas up here make up 1% of the population. So, you know, it's so important that when these movements happen, that people of colour and First Nation voices are at the forefront of this fight, and that we have our allies supporting us and backing us during these movements and continuing to show up and have that action as well.
Yeah, we gave them the chance to take on that responsibility for themselves, to take something away from this. So I think we done a march really different to a lot of other people, where we actually sat there and it felt like we were talking one-on-one with each other about a follow-up, about being a part of something. You can be a part of the change, and the change is coming. Like, it's inevitable. Change is one thing you can't fight against because it's happening every day. And
the people that sat down with you were obviously wanting to listen to what was being heard. Azeem, for you, when you're still going through this investigation at the moment, do you want to have the opportunity of actually sitting down with people and with other Asian cricketers in England and actually speaking like Ben and Tamika did to people to get them to understand more?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is the only way we're going to get some meaningful progress, really. I think education and sort of getting just that listening to each other, not just myself doing it, just everyone listening to each other. And I think that is the only way we're going to get anything meaningful moving forward.
Ben and Tamika, I'm going to come back to you because you've got a wonderful fashion label out at the moment. And I want to talk about appropriation because I think it sort of ties into a little bit about the Black Lives Matter moment. What's your take on people wearing Indigenous clothing, designed outfits, cricket tops and the like? Is it something that you actively want to say, yep, get it out there as much as possible to open up the conversation? But if you do so, you're part of the journey with us?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. So big thing when it comes to that is, number one, knowing who's making it, where it's coming from, and the story behind the design. There's a big movement at the moment going on in the community, especially just after Black Lives Matter as well, but about non-Indigenous people operating within our space that are harbouring our culture, that have never come from background of being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, but they just see it as an opportunity, which happens in a lot of different cultures all around the world. It happens everywhere. Yeah. But it's reclaiming our space, and just so people know that like everything that we make and everything that we hope everyone could make would be ally friendly for everybody to wear. But also, I like to wear things with meaning. So if I'm not wearing something that of mine, I'm generally wearing a black shirt, just because, just so I know where it's coming from. Like, especially after being a business owner and starting a label, I won't buy anything that's pointlessly like a branded thing, because I know what things are worth. And I think it's a really, really good move, and it's a really big push for fashion. And it's just another opportunity for Black people to have a business. Like, look into Black business, support Black business, support Black economy. There's been the opportunity around for a while, but a lot of people are starting to take and hone in on that opportunity as well.
Yeah, you're going to be the death of me, guys, because I'm Melburnian, so I've been in lockdown and online shopping has been my vice. So now it's just going to get even worse. So we're running out of time very, very quickly. I want to ask Tamika and Ben to start with. You mentioned allyship. If you had advice to people listening into the cricket community at the moment, what would your message be?
Okay. I think there's a lot of different layers to allyship, and I think at the end of the day you have to make sure that your intentions are right, and that you are willing to sit down and have these hard conversations and really be able to break through these layers that, you know, Western society and Western education builds us up to learn and to carry with us through our life's journey. And I guess, you know, as an adult and an individual, it's so important that you know, with the power of social media, that you are able to access and have these conversations and start breaking down the layers of, you know, things that you were taught to stereotype. And at the end of the day as well, allyship isn't just a trend as well. Like, people have to actively be involved, and if you want change to happen, you know, it can start off simply by signing up to a group and learning about what they do and what their actions and campaigns are and how you can assist with that. It could be as simple as, you know, just finding out what issues are going on that are impacting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and how can you be a voice to uplift their movements as well. So I think, yeah, by understanding and knowing what your intentions are, that's the start of allyship.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I said, a change is inevitable. Imagine, like, wouldn't you want to be a part of the change that's coming, like, especially on the positive side? Like, I just want to imagine, like, just think about it for a second. If you are unsure, come and ask us. Come and ask our people. Come and ask the grassroots mob that have suffered or that are trying to make change. Like, imagine a society where my kids, Azeem's kids, Jason's kids, didn't have to. We could all get along together, and especially non-Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander kids can all just be together, not feel uncomfortable about themselves and about who they are, and be proud of who they are. Being Australian, Aboriginal, being from all different other backgrounds. Imagine that, and just imagine how nice that would be for everyone to be able to share that with each other, within the household, within a game, within the community, within society. Everything would just be amazing. Like, just have. Like, there's always going to be a negative, regardless of where you come from. But there's always going to be a negative. But the change, like I said, you're going to keep going back to it. The change is just inevitable. Like, the change is coming, and you really, like, for me, myself, my message, I want to be a part of the change that I want to see in the world, and that's all I can put out there.
Yeah. I think Gandhi said that, isn't it? To be the change you want to see.
Yeah.
I'm an exceptionally hopeful kind of person, so I'm imagining when we're actually allowed to travel around the world again from Australia, that I will be sitting at a cricket ground in maybe 5 or 7 years' time with you, Azeem, and your family, and we're sitting there thoroughly enjoying watching cricket go on. It might be a club game, just a nice picnic going on, and we sit there and I turn to you and I say to you, are you in love with the game again? And what would your answer be?
Look, I'd love that to be the situation, and look, I love the game, and even with all the pain that it has, it's given me a lot of good things as well. So my love for the game, I don't think, I think over time as I heal, I think it's going to get back to where it was. I think for me, it's important that I do agree, Ben, change is inevitable, but it's a meaningful change. It's that we need. That is what we desire. Because look, there's a lot of things politically. There's a lot of things that get done to pretend there's a change, but ultimately, right now, still we don't have that. And meaningful change is something we need to keep on it. And from your emails and like speaking to Ebony, who put us in touch as well, it's important to keep on this and keep the, I guess, momentum, or just keep fighting the good fight, as you called it. And it's going to take time. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but we need to, as we go along, we educate more people join the fight. I think we will get that. And yeah, hopefully that will be the case 7 years.
I'll leave the wise words of Jason Gillespie to last. Dizzy, when you look at cricket and you look at the perfect picture in 10 to 20 years' time, what does it look like for you?
Well, I'm hoping that a lot of lessons are learnt. For me, I think having returned from the UK, and there's been a lot of things. Obviously, Black Lives Matter. I know Azeem came out and spoke on Sky. It was a very powerful message. Ebony spoke wonderfully well, as did Michael Holding. I'm hoping that it is the start of some meaningful conversations. It's easy to say it, I suppose, but I just sensed there was something a bit different in the UK this year. Like, certainly all the noise coming out of the ECB was a bit of a different narrative to what I've heard in the past, regarding things like the racism, for instance. So I'm hoping that there is a genuine desire to make things better. Again, it's going to come down to listening. Some words have been spoken just now, that the changes, be the change, with people. But I would encourage people to just listen and seek to understand, and try and put yourself in someone else's shoes and try and understand from another person's point of view. And I think if that happens, and the continual dialogue that we're hearing, certainly from the ECB, I'm hearing it around Cricket Australia. So I'm hoping, and I'm confident, I'm very hopeful, I'm very confident that the landscape will look a lot different going forward.
As I mentioned earlier on, I think it's really important that we do take the time not just to listen once, but to listen multiple times to interviews like Azeem's, to panels like this, because I really do think we get a different word or phrase, or we pick up on a different concept or idea that will resonate with us on different days for different reasons. So use that time wisely to really grapple with all the conversation pieces that are going on around the world at the moment. Now to try and encapsulate this last little hour very, very quickly, a few things do certainly come to mind for me. One of the words that was used on numerous occasions is draining. And I think we just need to be mindful of the energy levels of people who are living this daily, 24/7, and be respectful of that. There's also a sense of sadness to the stories that you hear, and in listening to people and how they're navigating their own lived experience. So empathy is key. Healing goes a long way back. And it will be continuing on probably for the next couple of generations as well, and it's all very uniquely individual. Education, we mentioned this in episode 1. There is so many different ways that you can educate yourself. If I could say one thing, just keep driving that yourself. It is most important to be curious, but don't wait for people to constantly feed you. Get out there and shake the cage, as I spoke about with Azeem. Identity, as Dan spoke about in episode 1, and Dizzy also spoke about today, is not for anybody to pass judgment on, bar the individuals themselves. And to wrap things up, I guess it was just an overriding sense of just hope and pride. And how can you not have hope when you've got two amazing young leaders, Australian Indigenous leaders in Ben and Tamika, doing what they are doing so well up on the Sunshine Coast? All power to you two. I'm thoroughly looking forward to watching your journey. To the bravery of Azeem, if I can say anything, Azeem, we are with you all the way. There might be thousands of miles between us, but you're part of the family now, so you're stuck with us. We'll be here for you right throughout, and looking forward to that cricket game in the future. And to Dizzy, I think we absolutely love watching you play. We've loved watching you sort of transition into coaching, and now for you to be such an open and honest communicator and mentor. I know that cricket's in good hands when we have people like you about. So to all four of you, thank you so much for being involved today. I'm confident, so confident in saying what you've provided us today, it will have a magnificently positive ripple effect across many, many lands. So thank you. A reminder, it's getting close to NAIDOC week, and that means that we will have episode 3 of Connecting Country out then, and it is all about some of our biggest Indigenous stars in the game. So we will have Ash Gardner on, Hannah Darlington, and a whole lot more as well. So once again, to Ben, Tamika, to Jason, and to Azeem, thank you so much. To everybody listening in as well, we thank you for your time and your open minds and commitment to ongoing allyship in this space. Stay safe, take care, and we'll catch you all in NAIDOC week.